DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast on this Wednesday, February the 12th. I'm your host, Michael Leva, joined by our in-house draft guru from right here at DolphinsTalk.com and also holding things down at the 33rd team, Dante Collinelli. Dante, how you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Senior Bowl where Dante was a few weeks ago and pick his brain on what he saw there in person. Just, we have our draft shows in April when we get closer to the draft. It's early February. We're going to have a big picture view of the draft and share some early thoughts before we get down to the granular level when we get to our shows in April. So we're going to talk about the draft, what we think Miami should do, some, parts of the draft that are weak, some areas of the draft that are strong, and we're going to talk about all that. But two things before we start today's show. Number one, I would be remiss if I did not wish our very own Tom Ernest a very happy birthday today. Tom is turning, I'm not going to say his age, but it's his birthday, and I know he spent it with the wife and the kids. So happy birthday, Tom. Hope you had a great day. And also, before we talk, we have to have a quick word from the sponsor of today's show.
The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com.
All right. So, Dante, you were at the Senior Bowl, which obviously not everyone in the draft is at the Senior Bowl, but you got a lot of the top prospects are there. And I guess right now in early February on the 12th, if you had to say this upcoming draft, would you say it's a strong draft? Is it a weak draft? Is it a lukewarm draft? How would you rate this draft early on? I know we still have to go through the combine and there's going to be pro days where we get more information, but just early thoughts on this draft. Is this a strong draft or nothing to get too excited about?
Yeah, I think overall, it's a solid draft. I think the word I would use to describe it is deep. I think it's a deep class. I don't know that you're going to find a lot of blue chip talent at the top. I think there's probably 3 of those guys in this draft. And then I think you're going to find a lot of good players. I don't know that this is going to be a draft that we look back on in 5 to 10 years and we're like, man, I can't believe the run on that draft. But I do think that this is a draft where if you have a lot of picks, I think you can find a lot of guys who can contribute to winning rosters. And so this is not a class that I think is bad or even lukewarm. I think it's good. I just think it's regular good. There's good players. You have good players at pretty much every position. Obviously, some are stronger than others, and we can get into those if you want. But I think that overall, there's a lot of good players. I think the thing that teams will have to make peace with is there's a lot of risk in this class. I think you have a lot of players who have a lot of upside. They have a lot of traits. They have a lot of ability, but you don't really have a lot of players that are sure things, right? And that's kind of what makes a draft class great. When you go into a draft class and you're like, you know what, there's just like 15 dudes this year that I feel great about. That's not this draft class this year, unfortunately, but there's plenty of talent. There is plenty of opportunity. There are plenty of contributors.
Yeah, because I saw a mock, and again, it's a mock draft. Take it with a grain of salt from NFL.com just the other day. They had Miami trading down from 13 to 25, and they picked up a pick in round 2 and in round 3, which would give them 1 pick in round 1 late, 2 picks in round 2, 2 picks in round 3. And I'm saying to myself, I don't know this year, just from my early research, if who you get at 25 is going to be drastically worse than who you would get at 13. I think some years there is a fall off the cliff moment in the draft. When you hit pick 12, there's like 12 guys. After that, it's you fall off a cliff. This year, just from my early research, I don't know if that's the case. And if a trade like that was ever presented to Miami, I might jump on that because I think between 13 and 25, if I can get an extra pick in round 2 and 3, I might say yes with all the holes that Miami has.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad decision. I think specifically for a team like Miami that I think has a lot of what I would consider to be small needs. You know, we can parse out the quarterback conversation, whatever. Let's set that aside. I think when you look at the biggest needs on this team right now, they're guard, linebacker. They could use some more defensive line, safety. I think defensive line's a premium position. Outside of that, I think you'll be getting players who are solid in the 2nd and the 3rd round at safety, at linebacker opposite Jordan Brooks. I think you can find guards who can play in year 1 and develop into good players in round 2. I think you can find that player in round 3. And all of those positions are also typically ones that you can find for value contracts and free agency. So I think if you're the Dolphins, having a lot of picks isn't necessarily a bad thing because you have so many needs that I think are easier to find, right? Like this is not a team. We can sit here and have a Patrick Paul debate if you want, but I know the Dolphins think that he's a future tackle, and they have Austin Jackson, who's a perfectly cromulent football player now, and that's great. And so they have tackle bookends. They're tied to Tua Tagovailoa. I don't think they're going to move on from him this year, so they have their quarterback. Assuming they keep Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, wide receivers taken care of, that's premium position. Right. So they need like tight end. They need, maybe a running back who weighs more than 180 pounds. They need, some guards. They need another linebacker, a safety.
Nose tackle. I think they need.
Right. But that's a player that you get in a trade back with a 3rd round pick, right? Like
exactly.
It's not a player that you need to be picking in the top 13 for. So I'm not saying they should trade back. To me, it depends on how the board falls. I think it's going to be a really weird year with the way the quarterbacks come off the board. And I think that's going to influence how other players fall. It would not surprise me if the Dolphins are sitting there at 13 and like Will Johnson's on the board. And to me, Will Johnson's a top 5 player in this class.
I jump all over that in a second.
Right. That's the corner from Michigan. He's a top 5 player in this class for me. I would take him there instead of trading back. So it always depends on how the board falls. But I think the way this draft class is set up and what needs the Dolphins have, I think they would be in a good position to trade back if that was an option to them.
Yeah. Let's start here again. Let's start with quarterbacks. We know Miami has their starting quarterback. It's not about that. We also know he cannot stay healthy. And, there comes a point where you have to at least have one eye on the future. Do I think they will take one around 1? No, that's not what I'm saying. But you saw a few quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl in person, 2 in particular. Number 1, Jackson Dart. Now, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, I liked him. I love him. No, but I liked him. I thought he's got a little moxie, a little bit of a live arm. Fun guy. Did he have a PR team down there in Mobile? Because now there's talk of him going. Like I'm thinking, second day, round 2 or 3, Jackson Dart. Some team's going to be very happy taking him there. There's talk that Jackson Dart round 1. There's talk Jackson Dart top half of round 1. Like what happened in Mobile? Is this all PR spin, or did he turn into Joe Montana overnight with Jackson Dart? What happened? What did I miss?
I think we just missed that nobody works harder than Jackson Dart's agent. That guy is just,
it has to be.
He's in his bag, man. He is up. I will say I was vehemently not impressed with Jackson Dart. There's a clip that I posted to my Substack that I have where I keep all my own personal draft content where he threw a ball on air that ran a receiver into the goalpost, and I'm actually standing 5 feet from where the receiver ran into the goalpost. You can see me and Kyle Krabs, who covers the Dolphins as well, like standing next to the receiver as he smacks into the goalpost trying to catch Dart's ball. So I was like vehemently not impressed with Dart. Setting aside my personal thoughts on the player, I do think that like if you draft him in round 3, if you draft him on day 3, I know if you follow me on Twitter, you know I've made some provocative comments about Dart, and that's mostly me doing a bit. He's perfectly fine as a day 3 player. He does not bother me there. If the Dolphins
How about day 2 player though?
It's tough, man. I don't know about all that.
I agree with you.
Here's my short rant on why I'm out on Dart. He plays in the easiest offense I've ever seen, and he's still late all the time. It's less about like, oh, he has traits that can develop. It's like, dude, you got a lot of ground to make up to get him to a level to where I can put him on an NFL field, and I feel comfortable that he's not gonna get killed, because he's just so. They tell him where to throw the ball at Ole Miss. When he gets to the line, they have a play that is called for a receiver, and he throws it every time, no matter what the defense gives him. And so that, to me, is the lowest point on the progression chart that you can be as a young quarterback. And so I need to build you up to a point, not even to where you're good, like you're average for the NFL, and then maybe I can put you on the football field. So, like, to me, it's, where is he going to get that time? How long am I investing in this player? So to me, like, that's a day 3 player. That's a total project. Like, I'm starting from 0 and I'm building him up. So,
but we know he's going to go in day 2. We know he's going day 2.
It's the quarterback tax. His agent's doing a great job. They get paid too. Yeah, they get paid too. You know, look, if he goes late on day 2, I'm not gonna like whatever. Like, the difference between pick 98 and pick 110 is negligible.
Nothing.
Like, what does it matter, right?
Exactly.
But like, if he goes like top 50, I may say some things that I regret on draft day, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch. And the other quarterback who has a great PR team as well is Dillon Gabriel, who people had him throwing the ball 80 yards, 90 miles per hour from everything I read down there. And I've seen that kid play. He wasn't doing that. So, and I've seen him mock to Miami. There was, once again, the one from Chad Reuter on NFL.com. Again, I know it's a mock. It doesn't mean nothing. But the point is, he's in the conversation round 3 with a pick 98 or something for Miami to have that young guy, you know, because they have their starter. They're probably going to sign a vet like Andy Dalton or somebody like that to be number 2. And if they want to take a young guy to start to develop, this is from late round 3 on, I'd be all on board, whether it's him. What did you see from him down there in Mobile? Is there anything you like with him? I'm not a huge fan of him, but
yeah, I mean, again, he's another guy that I would peg as a day 3 quarterback, where if you get him in the building, I think what you're getting with Gabriel is intangibles. I think you're getting a player who has seen a lot, has a lot of college football experience. This is a player who's assimilated himself to multiple different types of offense. This is a player who has proven that the people around him respect him. He's gutsy. He's mobile. I think he's accurate within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. And so you're looking at a player, to me, is just like a quintessential backup. Now, I think when you talk about the Dolphins specifically, I think he gets mocked to the Dolphins a lot because people see a small left-handed quarterback and they go, that's the place for him, right? And to me, I think Dillon Gabriel's a very different player than Tua Tagovailoa. I don't really see them as overly similar. I think people underestimate how much Dillon Gabriel relies on his ability to move and how much he does outside of the structure of the play and how little he throws with the kind of reckless anticipatory nature that Tua Tagovailoa has, right? Gabriel, to me, is a little bit more point and shoot, but he does understand defenses. I think you're doing a lot less coaching on the mental side with Gabriel than you are with somebody with Dart. But the problem with that is I think you have less tools to work with. Gabriel's arm is an arm that definitely exists, and his legs they exist. He can move a little bit, but I would not want him running the ball past the line of scrimmage in the NFL. I don't know how much he's going to be able to get away with some of the things that he got away with outside the pocket at Oregon, Oklahoma, and UCF. And at the Senior Bowl, I mean, he was okay. None of the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl really did anything to stick out, honestly, in either direction. There was a point on day 3 where I was walking around and I was like, Man, I don't have a single quarterback take, so I guess I'm gonna watch those guys, because you get back, you watch the practice tape, and it's just like nothing particularly interesting. Frankly, it's a bunch of just guys.
Yeah. Last thing on the quarterbacks is I'll say this: the most interesting thing, because I think we know Ward is going to go top of the draft. Sanders not far after. If it's one with Ward, who knows? But they're both going to go high. The question to me are the two guys to watch are Milroe, because there's something there, but it's how much of an investment you have to put into him to get him ready. Because to me, he is Hurts 2.0, but can he be Hurts in a year, or can he be Hurts in 2 years? So how much time you have to invest in someone like Milroe? The other one is a guy I saw every game this year, Kyle McCord. If the Miami Dolphins want a quarterback to young and develop, Kyle McCord fits Mike McDaniel's system to a T. Now, look, he has 2 bad games this past year. And the Ohio State years really weren't that bad, although it's tough for Ohio State because they have so much more talent than everyone else. It's just easy pitch and catch. At Syracuse, he had some talent around him, but they were never at a talent advantage when they're playing a Miami or they're playing a Pittsburgh. It's Syracuse. Someone like him, those are going to be the two guys I'm going to watch through the process of the next few months to see where teams see them. I think Milroe, if he does good, could go late round 1, but I think more likely round 2. And I think Kyle McCord is probably a round 3 guy, but how early in round 3 can he possibly move up to? And I think those are the two guys to keep an eye on. Not for Miami so much, because I don't know what they're going to do with quarterback. They might just punt this year on a young guy, which I wouldn't do it, but I think they might. I think from round 3 on, if you're Miami, if the right guy's there, you almost have to. They got 10 picks. Okay, you got 10 picks to play with. You might have more if you slide down some. If the right one's there from round 3 on, take a shot because you still got 9 other picks. That's just me. We'll see what they do. Tight end. Tyler Warren wasn't there. I want to get your thought on him, though, because I think fans think he's the next Brock Bowers, and he's not. Now, that doesn't mean he's bad, but he's not Brock Bowers. Early hot take. If he's there at 13, would you be upset if Miami took him?
Not even a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like Warren. I think I sent you a tweet back when Penn State was playing in one of the playoff games. Like, I like him a lot, but he's not Brock Bowers, all right?
No, I don't think so. But to put into perspective, like, what is Brock Bowers? Brock Bowers is my highest graded tight end prospect of all time. Yeah. So, like, I have a first-round grade on Tyler Warren. He's going to be a top 10 player for me at the end of the draft process. That's not going to change. I think specifically for Miami, he can also just do a lot for you. I think it's probably one of his better landing spots in the entire league. I don't think he goes past, like, if the Dolphins don't take him, I think the Colts get a speeding ticket running the card to the podium. So I'd be perfectly fine with picking him at 13. He's probably one of my top 5 guys that I would want to take there, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, where I am with Miami in this draft is, they got their big ticket items, the Ramseys, Zach Steeler, I'll throw in there, Hill, Waddle, Armstead if he stays, Chubb. They got that. They need to elevate the talent floor. So as long as they take good football players with every pick, I'm fine. Be damned the position, because we have needs literally everywhere. We have tons of needs in the secondary, needs at linebacker, needs on defensive line, wide receiver depth, we have none. Second string quarterback's a big question mark. Running back wouldn't hurt. Tight end, you got one guy you trust. So I'm just for taking good football players this year, because I think that's what they need. And he's a good football player. So if they take him at 13, I'm fine with that. The other guy who was at the Senior Bowl, who's got a little bit of buzz around him now, is Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. What did you see from him? Do you think he's a guy who's going to be there rounds 2 and 3 when Miami's on the clock?
Yeah, I think he'll be there in rounds 2 and 3. And Harold Fannin Jr. is a really unique football player, because you watch him move, you watch him run routes, you watch the Bowling Green tape, and you go, I don't understand how this guy is open all the time. Because he's not, I don't mean that as like a slight, but like
that's a good sign. Yeah.
He's not fast. He's not particularly nimble.
Football player finds a way to get open.
Yeah, he just there's a play where I filmed it on my phone and I posted it to Twitter where he almost killed me on the sideline on a one-on-one drill. And I just I remember starting the video, he's covered, and then 3 seconds later, he's open on the sideline standing 3 feet from me. He's just a very weird player. And what's interesting about Fannin Jr., though, that I think makes him a really difficult evaluation is that you have to be very deliberate about your plan for him. If the Dolphins draft Harold Fannin Jr., they shouldn't have Jonnu Smith on the roster anymore. To me, they're the same football player. I don't really see a functional difference between those two players in that offense.
Not a compliment to what we already have is what you're saying.
Correct. So to me, that's a sign that Jonnu Smith is on his way out. If they were to take Harold Fannin Jr., I think the Dolphins need to get somebody who can block. And as we know, Jonnu Smith, this is not meant as a slight. It is what it is. He's a wide receiver. He plays wide receiver. He winds up in the backfield, whatever. He's a wide receiver. The Dolphins need somebody with some girth, some bulk, some guy who can block. That's not Harold Fannin Jr. I appreciate his blocking effort on tape. He tries, and I appreciate that. But the technique, the overall physicality, he just doesn't have it. It's not his thing. And so for me, I struggle with his profile because he's supposed to be this really athletic pass catcher. And he's not that athletic, but he just finds a way to get open. He catches everything. He was the entire Bowling Green offense. He's one of the best tight ends statistically in college football history. So he's clearly a talented player.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he'd be a great red zone target for a team like Miami. But again, like Jonnu, you already kind of got that. He's in the final year of his deal. Jonnu played so well that you might look to extend him maybe. And if you do, then there's not a need for this guy. But I know he's a name that's got a lot of buzz around him right now. He's going to be one of these guys who are going to go flying up the draft boards. Not round 1, obviously, but round 2. I could see him going top part of round 2 for sure because there's something there.
I mean, if a team has a plan for him, they go into it and they're like, we're going to draft him. We're not going to ask him to be anything that he's not. And we're just going to let him go out there and do his thing. He'll be fine. But so often those players go to teams that don't have a plan, or they have a different plan than the one that they should have, and they don't work out well. So trying to balance that, right? He's a player where I'm probably going to be pretty low on him relative to consensus. But if you told me pre-draft, hey, he's going to go play for the Steelers and Arthur Smith, I'd bump him up 2 rounds, right? It's oh, he's one of those guys.
We have a question from someone in the chat here, Josh. Is Dante still in the same room from years ago? No, and he's now in a room in Texas. He's not in a room no more in Philadelphia. He moved up to a room in Texas. Same room. It looks like the same room, but it's not.
Does it really look that similar? I guess it does.
I don't know.
The same
white background.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the offensive line. Oh, that pesky offensive line when it comes to the Dolphins. Now, look, I know Dolphins fans want every pick to be an offensive lineman. That's just not realistic. But let's talk about a couple guys at the Senior Bowl. There's 3 in particular. Number 1, another guy with a lot of buzz around him coming out of Mobile was Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. What were your thoughts on him? Interior guy. What you see there?
Yeah, I thought he was the best player at the event. At least performance-based, who performed the best at the event. I think Gray Zabel had the best week of anyone present. He was, incredible in one-on-ones. I think he lost 2 reps all week. He took them at center. He took them at both guard spots. Showed power, fluidity, good hand placement. Everything that you could possibly ask for. He was a player I was super high on before the event. I've bumped him into my top 40 now. He's a top 40 player for me. I think that's where he should go. This is a player who I think can play guard or center for you. He had a great week. I think he is one of the few guys who deserve the Senior Bowl buzz. I felt like he answered legitimate questions. Anytime you have a small school guy, how do they handle bigger school, better athletes? He did that. I had specific questions about the finer points of his pass protection. He looked great in one-on-ones. That's not the best evaluation environment, but he's set up to lose there, and he won a lot. And so I was super impressed with him. And, he got an opportunity to work closely with the Dolphins assistant O-line coach. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the well there if he's on the board in the 2nd round.
Yep. And he'd be a perfect fit for what they need because they need 2 guards, probably more for depth, and maybe a backup center as well that you can trust. So, yeah, he's someone who I think will be on Miami's radar day 2. A guy who I'm a big fan of, and talk about a big boy, Anthony Belton at NC State. Now, I live in ACC country. This is a mountain. If you think Patrick Paul is big, this guy's big too. Big guy, but he can move a little bit more. Not a day 1 pick, obviously, but any thoughts on Anthony Belton?
Yeah, I liked him. He had a really good week at Mobile as well. I think you kind of had some questions.
Right tackle, right? He's a right tackle.
Yes, they lined him up in both spots. I believe he played right tackle at NC State. I can double check that. But he's a bigger guy, like you said. It's kind of funny. He almost kind of looks like Patrick Paul. Like when you see him in person, they have very similar body types. He weighs
like 335, 340, I think.
Yeah, he's 6'6", 336. He's listed at for NC State, and he played left tackle. So he's a left tackle. They lined him up in both spots in Mobile. I think with him, I had some questions about whether or not he should play guard at the next level, just because I think he has the physical demeanor of a guard. And I was a little bit on the movement skills and some of the technique stuff. I thought he had a really good week at Mobile. I'm going to leave him at tackle. To me, he's a player where you play him at tackle. If he doesn't work there, you kick him inside. I'd like to see him. I'd like to give him that opportunity. I think he's earned that. I think his tape's good enough. I've got about a 3rd round grade on him. I think he's a really, really solid player with the size and the traits that you want at the position.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, just my head, if Armstead's not here, and it sounds like he might be here next year, but if he's not here, you got Paul and you have Austin Jackson. You need offensive tackle depth. Sorry, I'm not a big believer right now in Keon Smith at this point. I think at some point you just got to, churn the bottom of the roster a little bit. And someone like him, round 3 on, if he happens to be there, could be someone that you bring in to be depth at offensive tackle with someone else as well, obviously. So that's why he's on my brain. The other name who, if Miami was to trade down in round 1, I think is a guy late round 1, and I'm gonna say his name wrong. I know it. Out of Arizona, offensive tackle, but mainly a guard in the NFL. Johanna Savalina. I know I said it wrong. If they do trade down to round 1, I think he'd be in the mix there because I do think he's a late round 1 type guy out of Arizona. What do you think there? Because I know he was at the Senior Bowl as well.
Yeah, I'll be a lot lower on him than consensus. To me, he's a late day 2, early day 3 guy. I think
that's really lower than everybody else.
Yeah, I think he's a guard. I don't think that he's a tackle. I think that you have a player who's limited by his athletic ability. I don't think he has the longest arms in the world. I wasn't overly impressed with his performance in Mobile, but I don't think he was bad either. I thought he had a good week. I did like a B+, like good week. I thought he performed well. I actually moved him up when I got home. So I was lower on him a few weeks ago. I like the player. I think if you get him in Miami, you play him at guard. I think what you're going to get out of him is physicality. I think you're going to get a player who has that road grader mindset. He wants to kill the guy next to him. And sometimes that goes better and sometimes it goes worse, whatever. I think the Dolphins could use that. So look, I'm not one of those people who gets like super, super mad when the Dolphins take guys that I have lower on my board. You just kind of think about the pick.
Look at Patrick Paul last year.
Exactly.
You bit your tongue big time.
Yeah, right. So it happens, right? But you think about the pick and you go, okay, how, where's the team's line of thinking? If they took him late in round 1, would I love it? No, but I would get it. It would make sense to me. It's not just like this random guy that they selected in the first. It's not Noah Igbenogany. So like that to me is fine. So I think he had a good week at Mobile. I think if you play him at guard and you go into that with the understanding that he's a limited but okay player, you'll be fine and you'll be okay with the production that you get from him.
All right. Let's go to the other side of the ball. Not as in depth because I don't want to keep you all night. Let's start just in the secondary in general. Who stood out in Mobile in the secondary? Because I look at this roster for Miami. They have one safety right now under contract, and Patrick Morris, which who the hell knows what he is. And they have one cornerback you trust in Ramsey. Kader Kohu is fine for what I don't have a lot of faith in him. So they need a lot of help in the secondary. I don't think Holland will be back. But watch Chris Grier pay him a ton just to annoy me. What do you think? Who stood out in the secondary in Mobile? And, we often joke that when Miami takes a corner in round 1 or even in round 2, like Cam Smith, Dolphins fans lose their mind. But you and me usually say the quiet part, they kind of need it. Well, this year they really need help in the secondary. So who stood out?
Yeah, it's Mobile's a really tough place for corners, man. They are not set up to win there. So I think some of the guys who stood out will be probably guys who go on day 3. I don't know that the Mobile corner group was filled
Round
with the
one
best
guys.
players
Yeah.
in the class. So if I look at my current board, the way it's set up, my top 5 corners were not at the event. And my 6th corner was in Mobile, and he went home after day 2. And that was Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. And so for me, like some of the guys who stood out, I thought Upton Stout from Western Kentucky had a really good week. He's kind of he's really small, but he's physical. He's a total pest. I think I'm not comparing him to this player, but the mentality, the way they play the game reminds me a bit of Antoine Winfield Jr. in the fact that like he's small, but like, God, is he annoying as hell. Like receivers must hate going against this guy. I don't know, like, how well he's going to translate. He had a great week. He just beat the crap out of some guys at the line of scrimmage. I thought he was really good. Mac McWilliams from UCF had a really good week. I haven't watched his tape yet. He's somebody I'll have to get to. And then in the safety room, it's kind of the same thing. Like I think you get a lot of guys at the top of the class who didn't go. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame was supposed to be there. He bailed out because Notre Dame played a really long season. Andrew Makuba from Texas, same deal, supposed to be there. Top 5 safety in the class, bailed out. So I don't really have a ton of takeaways from safety other than I think you've got some players who like Billy Bowman. He's another smaller guy from Oklahoma. He had a nice week, but he's a day 3 guy. He's a guy that you're probably going to want to put on special teams. I don't know how much you want to see him on the field. I think the starting caliber corners and safeties mostly are underclassmen or injured, frankly. So it's a really weird secondary class, at least in my opinion.
Okay. Front 7, another area where Miami has needs. We don't know what's going on with Chubb, if he'll be back. Jalen Phillips still recovering from an ACL. Chop Robinson had a very good rookie year. Zach Sealer's fine. After that, Jordan Brooks you got, but not much else right now. I think they need big bodies in the middle. They never replaced Wilkins. Campbell was a 1-year Band-Aid, but they have to replace Wilkins long-term with somebody, have somebody to sort of pair up with Zach Sealer. And they also need someone in the middle because Benito Jones was not good last year. He had moments, but he wasn't great. And Hand is a nice rotational player to give you maybe 10 snaps a game. So who stood out middle of the line there to help maybe replace those guys long-term? Did anyone stick out?
Yeah, so I think the defensive tackle class is like, and the edge group in general, I think it's the best position group in this draft. I think it's the deepest. I think it's the best. You saw a ton of those guys at Mobile. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss is this really quick, athletic player. I think a comp I've seen a lot for him is Ed Oliver. You need to develop him. I don't know that he's going to be this like instant impact player, but you have every trait that you could possibly ask for. You can kind of mold him in any direction you want. If you're looking for like a big, just boulder to sit in the middle of the line, Jamari Caldwell was there from the University of Oregon, just this big 330-pound plus guy. He can 2-gap, he can split double teams. He'll give you a lot of that. I thought he had an okay week. I think a lot of the standouts you saw up front were some of the edge guys. Shamar Stewart, I think, didn't maybe have the best week at the event, but I thought he was the best player at the event, period. He's a top 10 player for me. I really like him for the Dolphins at 13. And then Darius Alexander from Toledo had a ton of hype behind him. I got a chance to interview him. If it wasn't for Greg Zabel, I think Darius Alexander probably had the second best week at the event. He was an absolute monster and he is rocked up. Let me tell you, like seeing that guy in person, like I cannot believe he came from Toledo. That dude is jacked. He looks like he's ready to play NFL football right now. So there's a bunch of other names I could have mentioned. This is an incredibly deep, talented, and diverse defensive line class. You got nose tackles, you got 2-gappers, you got guys who can, get into gaps, more like 1-gap shooters. You got on the edge, you got your bendy speed rushers, you got your power rushers, you got your run defenders, like whatever you want. There are going to be guys that were going to be there. And I think you saw that in Mobile. I think you saw just so many guys have really good weeks on the defensive line, but those were probably the few standouts.
The guy I love, and I told you about this in season, and I stand by it now, out of Kentucky, is Walker. I love that kid. I think he's going to be a good pro. He's got a motor on him that just doesn't stop, I think. And, he plays for Kentucky. So, again, in the SEC, Kentucky's always undermatched, and he just shows up every week, every play. I love that kid. I don't know I know he's like round 1 or 2. I don't know where the latest projections on him are, but he's a guy. If he found his way to Miami somehow, some way, I would love it because I think he's going to be a great pro. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. Everyone's wrong with some of this stuff. But Stewart as well, I'm very high on him as well. I think defensive line for me is where Miami really needs to invest. Everyone says offensive line, and yes, I agree. But if Armstead's back, you got Paul, Austin Jackson. Those are your tackles. You don't really need to invest anymore this year. And then you have your center. And, I know it's unpopular, but between Wynn, Robert Jones, and Liam, I think they re-sign 1 or 2, and then they sign a vet in free agency, and they'll draft 1 in rounds 1, 2, or 3. But I don't think they want to pigeonhole themselves to where they have to draft an offensive lineman in rounds 1 or 2. And I know it's unpopular, but if they re-sign Wynn and let's say Robert Jones, because I know Liam's kind of toxic, but if they re-sign those 2, sign a vet. I don't know who the vet's going to be. Sign someone in March, a vet from another team who you can pencil in as a starter. Then you have your left tackle, your right tackle, your center, 1 guard. You don't need to use every pick on offensive lineman. You just need to find 1 to compete with like Wynn or whoever to start at 1 guard spot. You got a little bit of depth now with, say Jones is back or whatever, and Paul as your swing tackle. And then it frees up the draft to take best player available because Lord knows, like we said, secondary, they have a ton of needs on the line outside of Zach Sealer. They have a ton of needs. Jordan Brooks is a good linebacker. They have no other linebackers. I mean, pure linebackers, not edge rushers that you trust. They have wide receiver depth is a problem. Running back, which we didn't even mention because I think it's so low on the list. But yeah, they probably gonna need one because I don't think Mostert will be here. Wilson will be here. And Jaylen Wright played so little last year. We don't know who the hell he is. So I think, yes, running back at some point is a need, and tight end, like we spoke about. So I don't think they want to pigeonhole themselves with the offensive line, but I do think they'll sign a vet, and I do think they'll draft 1 in the first 3 rounds. But all the fans who think they have to take 1 in round 1, they might take 1 in round 1, but I don't think they want to be in a spot where they have to take 1 in round 1. Am I nuts?
Yeah. No, I don't think you're nuts at all. I mean, and this is kind of what I talked about at the top of the show. Like, guard is not a position that is lacking for options in the free agent market. Like, you can find good guard play. And I think, Dolphins fans are kind of scarred by the offensive line play over the past, probably the better part of my entire life, which is 25 years. So I get it. I understand the impulse, but you don't need world beaters at guard. You don't need to go out there and spend $100 million at guard. You just need some guys who are like NFL starters. You know what I mean? Like Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones are not NFL starters. They're below average players. They are. If they're your backup, I don't really care. Like,
Again,
I'm fine with that. But they should not be starting all 17 weeks for you. It's not good enough. And so, but the point is you don't have to find that upgrade at 13. Like
Robert Hunt, top of round 2, you were fine. And with our pick in round 2, which is like 48, I think, you can probably find the next Robert Hunt type there if you do your homework and hit on it, and that's fine. And you can opens up 13 to fill another need. Yeah,
because here's the thing too, is like, this is not a good guard class. Like, if you're talking about like purely guys who played guard in college,
you got the kid from Missouri and you got the kid from Alabama. Are probably
the kid from Missouri played tackle in college.
But he will play guard in the NFL though.
We'll see. But see, that's the thing. That's what I'm trying to say, I know. You have all of these guys who are like, well, maybe they're a tackle, maybe they're a guard. The only top 50 picks who actually played guard in college is Tyler Booker from Alabama. Like, we talked about Gray Zabel, and I'm super high on him. He played tackle at North Dakota State. That dude's
one of the Ohio State kids a guard, or am I wrong?
Donovan Jackson went the other way. So he started at guard
and went to tackle
and kicked out to tackle. So you've just got like this weird, like Will Campbell from LSU. I think he's a guard, but he played tackle at LSU. Who's going to view him that way? What's it going to be? So like, Dolphins fans have this like inclination that every time there's a mock draft that goes out that doesn't include an offensive lineman at 13,
it's a horrible mock draft.
Yeah, they just lose their guy. They lose their minds. And it's just like, dude, there are other things that exist, and like free agency, and there are 6 other rounds to find guard. Like if it was tackle, I would understand. That's a bigger conversation. That's a premium position. I would get that a little bit more, but like, I am not going to sit here and be like, no, dude, we're just going to pass on Tyler Warren because we need a guard and we're just going to take Tyler Booker at 13. Like, that's not good. That's bad.
Yeah. The interesting one for me is going to be Kelvin Banks, because I think that's more of a Laramie Tunsil situation to where you draft him, move him inside, and if Austin Jackson's gone in a year, because his contract is going to go by pretty quick here, you have him for that, or if Patrick Paul's just not good, you have insurance there. And that's a guy who I think if he's there at 13, I've seen some mocks where he goes just before 13, somewhere he does go right at that area, 13, 14, 15, whatever. He's a guy that's going to be an interesting one because I do think he can play guard. But again, he hasn't played guard, but I think he can. And I think he's also insurance for Patrick Paul and also for Austin Jackson, who, let's be honest, outside of 1 year is always hurt. So we have to start to view him in the lens of someone like Armstead at this point. Austin Jackson's like hurt a lot. So someone like Banks at 13, I'd love, because I think he checks a lot of boxes for what Miami wants to do up front. But yes, you're right. I'm with you. I don't want to be pigeonholed to where we have to take an offensive lineman at 13 or in round one if they trade down. If they take one, great, but I don't want to be pigeonholed to where they have to, because that's just bad. And I know it's Chris Grier, and a lot of people are saying, well, okay, I get it. But let's not try to be bad. Let's aim higher, Dante. We want to aim higher as Dolphins fans and be good this year.
I agree. Let's do it. When it
comes to the draft. All right, Dante. Thanks so much. Everyone, be sure to follow Dante Collinelli at the 33rd team right here at DolphinsTalk.com, and also with Alan Popard at what's that?
All Dolphins.
All Dolphins. AllDolphins.com, and follow him on social media, Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it this week, at Dante Collinelli. And yes, once we get to late March, first part of April, I'll have him on each week. We're going to go through every position, more granular, tied into the needs of the Dolphins. We'll break it down more in depth as we get out of the combine and pro days. But this was just sort of wet your whistle, and pick his brain, because he was at the Senior Bowl and he saw a lot of stuff up close and personal. So yeah, well, everyone get ready. Drafts will be here before we know it, and we'll be here with those weekly shows breaking it all down. Everyone, thank you for listening. Check out the website DolphinsTalk.com, and we'll talk to you again after a while. Folks, don't forget, we must put an end to highway profanity.